Hi, chat, by the way. Thanks for coming, guys.
All right, so welcome everybody to this week's AMA. This week we're here with Coach Brad, aka Seffi. He is the head coach for San Francisco Shock and has been working with the team basically since we were been building the roster. We've been gathering all your questions, and yeah. So if Brad, if you want to go ahead and give yourself a quick intro, and then we'll get started on the questions.
Yeah, sure. As Baker said, I'm Brad. I was formerly the owner and head coach of Selfless, which was an Overwatch team prior to the formation of the Overwatch League in 2016 and early 2017. Um, one thing led to another. We did pretty well, and that's essentially how I ended up here in my current job, coaching the San Francisco Shock. We brought two of the players along with us, Dak and Sinatra, and then we picked up 7 other guys from around the world. Most of them NA, but we have 3 EU players, and it's just been an awesome journey ever since the formation of the team, which the team started to come together October-ish, right? I don't know, somewhere around there.
It was like September, I think, when we were
Yeah,
finalizing
September,
it.
October. Yeah. And yeah, no, I mean, it's just been like a sick experience of like just team building and relationship building and working on our Overwatch skills, obviously, and trying to become the best team. And every single week, it's like just little improvements that take place, and it's my favorite thing in the world to do is to see that happen. So yeah, that's who I am. That's why I'm here.
Sweet. So, uh, we'll start to move along to some of the questions. And the first question we just touched on selfless there a bit. Someone is asking, would you say that your playstyle is anything similar to the aggressive, scrappy playstyle that selfless would always run, or is it something different altogether?
I would say it's something different. Um, insofar as it's similar in the sense that we still are, Baby Bay, who's a member of the starting roster currently. Um, he's a hit scan player, right? And Selfless wasn't built around Defran. Selfless wasn't built around anyone in particular. People say Selfless was built around Defran. It really wasn't. When Selfless was good, it was in the meta. It was in like a fatter meta for the game, right? Not really full on dive. Like Rogue had just been introducing dive to the Western scene, right? Like when Selfless was basically didn't lose a scrim for like 3 months, it was against people running Reinhardt based compositions, right? Slower, less mobility, not dive. And Selfless was not built around anyone in the sense that the way that in which we won was to surround the enemy, right? You'd have Defran, flanking top left. You'd have Sinatra blinking behind them. You'd have Dak, flanking from the side. You'd have Kresnik playing like a very baity Reinhardt, just like pretending to play the game, but he's really just like mind gaming you the whole time, right? He picks his moment, you know what I mean? But until then, he's very patient, right? So Kresnik was a very patient Reinhardt player. And the whole thing was like a big bait. We're like wrapping this net around you and then closing it. That's how the old Selfless used to play, right? And yeah, we did spawn camping, right? We didn't give space for free, and that all became meta as far as everyone's concerned, right? Like now tanks go out there and they create space. They don't like just like sit and wait for you to come back to the payload and push it again, right? Like no, Um, so, what Selfless did with the spawn camping thing more or less became meta to a large extent across the board, right? In terms of like building around a hit scan player, what we really did is we were just making individualistic plays on Selfless. You can't really do that anymore in this sort of very heavy dive meta. I mean, the most dominant composition in the game in Apex for the last couple of seasons and now in the OWL is Tracer Genji dive. You know what I mean? Like it's highly mobile, punishes people that are out of position, punishes people that are over aggressive. It's an over aggressive play style itself. So we are not like, if you look at Selfless and you say Selfless was Selfless because they were aggressive, well, the most aggressive composition right now is Tracer Genji, and for the San Francisco Shock, that's one of our worst compositions. Baby Bay isn't the best Tracer or Genji. and so we can't play the most aggressive team composition in the game as like a forte. Like we pull it out when we need to, when we have to. And there are some maps where it's like just completely dominant, and you kind of have to play that. But we try to play slower hit scan based compositions when we can, just because of the abundance of hit scan players that we have. And I would say, generally speaking, those hit scan compositions are not aggressive in the way that Selfless used to be aggressive or be considered aggressive. So dive is just inherently more aggressive than hit scan based. Even when we're running dive tanks, like just the hit scan just slows our team down, makes us play a slower style. So it's different.
Yeah, for sure. That's a that was a really good in-depth answer that for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. So moving on to the next question. How would you rate how the first 2 weeks of the OWL has gone? I'm assuming they mean just Shock rather than the general thing.
I mean, I could talk about both, I guess.
If you want.
For the league as a whole, I think it's awesome how well the Korean teams went undefeated, right?
Yeah.
So not much has changed there. I think their experience and their versatility is shining through. Fleta's, showing like what a monster he is. New York is like, people didn't know what to think, and they came out, and New York's been one of the strongest teams. I mean, we actually like really look up to New York personally. Our team looks up to New York a lot because they play the style of Overwatch that we want to play. They just play it better than us at the moment. You know what I mean? Like they're not necessarily always resorting to going heavy full retard, everyone jump in dive, right? Which is what Boston's doing, Valiant's doing, Philly's doing. Like these teams that just go Tracer Genji and just jump your backline over and over and over. New York has not done that. They've played slower compositions and they've won against teams trying to dive them, which is they're playing anti-dive and they're winning, and it's really cool. But the Korean team's going undefeated. That's awesome. The rest of the field is kind of wide open. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay. Shanghai, Dallas, and Florida had a rough start. And what's the other team that had a rough start? There's another team that's having a rough start. There's like 4 teams having a rough start, 3 teams that are doing extremely well, and then the rest is just like wide open, right? And I think that's just like great for the season as a whole. It keeps it exciting. Like anything could happen.
For sure. I know right now I think it's like there's 3 undefeated teams, 5 2-2s, like 1 3-1. The rest are like 1-3 or 0-4.
Right.
So
I
it's really
mean,
close.
as far as shot goes, I think we had a rougher start than we wanted. Our team in the first couple of games, our team is a different team on match day than they have been in scrims. They get like really overexcited, and they don't really like stay as they just lose a little control. In terms of comms, it gets very cluttered. The excitement ramps up, and then it snowballs from there. You know what I mean? And that didn't really happen yesterday, which was like, for me, was the biggest win yesterday. Is like just the composure that they kept throughout the entire series, all the way to the end. And that's what I'm hoping to build on, for the rest of the season, is to just let the jitters fade. You know what I mean? And it becomes more business as usual. And then all the hard work and stuff they do in scrims will start to shine through more. So yeah, I think we're just like, we started off on an emotional roller coaster for the start of the season, and as the season goes forward, we're gonna like level out and let the game sort of come to us a little more. And I think that's the thing I'm looking forward to. So I think we had a rough start, but I think like we're starting to stabilize.
Yeah, so you touched on how like a lot of the people in the roster are like excitable and like emotional kind of thing. Someone else will lead that into the next question, which someone asks that Shock seems to have a roster full of strong personalities, and some have called this a weakness. What would you say to those who have this concern?
I think it's one of those things. It's like a weakness starting out for sure. Because when you have a bunch of people with strong personalities, they're stubborn, they're opinionated, they like to stick to what they think is the right thing, right? And not always. You just have a lot of leaders and not a lot of followers, right? Like that's. But I think the strong personality. The strong personalities can, at some point later on, transition into being like a big strength. Once you like solidify the bonds between the teammates and they learn to trust each other and they learn to um, take all of that energy have and channel it, not just for themselves but for their teammates. Then you have like a high intensity environment, right? Where people aren't shutting down, but they're also not being selfish. So it's like one of those things where it's like I've always been of the opinion like I prefer to, instead of getting a team that's like insanely coachable from day one, rather than do that, I want to take the people that are just like driven, motivated, trying to be the best at the game, everything that just makes them who they are in terms of their quest for excellence, and then channel that, and to do that you need to build an environment that's like sort of band of brothers type environment, you know what I mean? Like, and you could see it yesterday on stage, right? Like right after they won, like everyone just got up and started hugging each other and celebrating together. Even young Dante, who's like this like quiet little reserved, like, sort of deadpan monotone kid, he's just like, he was so excited, like he couldn't help but get out of his chair, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which you don't usually see from him. He's usually sitting there like, like smiling and smirking but not necessarily jumping out of the seat. So this is like what we're trying to build. It takes time, it takes like a lot of, shared sort of sacrifice, and experience together, but I think, later in the season you're going to see that pay off. So I think it's a weakness early on and a strength later.
All right, sounds good. You talked a bit about how you always make sure you pick up the most dedicated players. And once again, I'm going to make this lead into one of our next questions, which is, who would you say is the most dedicated player on the team?
Mm. Um, it's probably a tie between. Geez, I don't know, man. They're like competing with each other for this spot, but I guess Nevix, maybe. Nevix is just like he's very much like the guy that just literally lives and breathes the game. Dak and Nevix have this like competition with each other, like who gets into the office first in the morning. Like they like curse like when they're the second one in, basically. Like, Dak walks through the door and Nevix is already there. He's like, God damn it. You know what I mean? Like that's happening a lot. Dante, is not the first one in the office per se, but Dante will be like, he grinds the game when he goes home. He's sending me texts at like 2 a.m. He's just like, watch the VOD or something. And I'm like, go to sleep, kid. You know what I mean? But like, there's just a whole lot of dedication across the board on this team. You know what I mean? And I made sure to pick up people that I thought were like 100% invested into winning. You can see it kind of represented in the stream hours of the starting lineup. Like, a lot of these guys used to stream a lot, and now their stream hours are for the most part way down. Because they're more focused on winning and more focused on the OWL than they are on stream and the personal life and everything like that. So there's a lot of commitment and a lot of buy-in across the board now on the team, which is awesome.
All right, cool. Sounds good. I remember when we were first when we were trying out players, we were trying out Nevix. It was one of those things where we had him like at the house in Vegas, and it was just like he kept walking into his room and he was like practicing diva bombs and in custom games. It's just like that stuff's
Yeah.
like that's just there's a measure, and I know everybody's been talking about Poco because he said the same thing, just like practicing diva bombs. It's just like there's like the extra step, and it's super. There's a lot of players here that do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's Nevix was only a diva player after we asked him to become one. He had literally never played the hero. You know what I mean? And then we're like, hey, we're thinking of trying you out for this spot. I mean, this is, he's one of the most versatile players in the game, and it's only possible because of his dedication to the game, right? So Nevix is unique in this sense, I think, more so than most.
All right, we'll move on to the next question. So, what has been your favorite moment of the season so far?
For sure, last night's win. I mean, there was such an intense match, super close, and just the way that the players came together and they all supported each other. Whereas on the being totally honest with you, in the first match of the season against the Valiant, like it got tense between the guys. Like a couple of mistakes and then people get upset. You know what I mean? And because they're all so emotionally invested into winning, right? And they let the moment own them instead of them owning the moment on the first day of the season. And last night it was not like that. Last night, they owned the moment. they didn't let it take control of them. They just grabbed it by the throat basically, and they won. And then you could see just how happy they were about the whole thing. So that was my favorite moment of the season. It's actually going to be hard to top that, you know, anytime soon. I think that was just amazing. Yeah.
All right, so next question I have is relating to just like, actually on-stage matches. How does coaching work backstage, like during the matches? What is your guys' input, like how that functions, if you could talk about that? I'm pretty sure it's all right.
So there's a dugout, quote unquote, and it has two TVs. One TV is just playing the mainstream, and the other TV is playing like it's the different camera views of the observers. So it's like maybe like 5 or 6 screens, right? Or 5 or 6 like windows inside of a screen. So it's a little smaller, and it's a little harder to see. But then right in front of that TV is 2 headsets that connect to the players, right? So you can hear what they're saying during the match, and then you have a microphone that you can talk to them between the breaks, between the maps. You can't talk between halves. You can't talk during the match itself. You can only talk between maps, right? So I essentially sit there and I watch the match, and I have the microphone, the headset on, and then when they unmute me and they allow me to talk, that's when I essentially coach them. Tell them about what's going right, what's going wrong, what to keep in mind for the next map, what we're expecting the enemy team to play, what going over like what we're going to be playing, reminding them, certain players to do certain things, in terms of creating space or playing defensive or playing aggressive or there's a lot of things, right? But all the coaching stuff essentially happens between the maps itself. And then at halftime, after the 2 maps are over, the players do come back to the dugout for about 5-10 minutes, and we talk to them during that time as well. And that's when usually when they come back to the dugout during halftime, when like the players chime in with their input. Super and Sinatra will be there, and they'll say what they noticed. Also, I mean, we do let players hop on the headsets. So there's only 2 headsets that talk to the players, between halves. But Cutie has been spending a lot of time in the headset, talking to the players between maps. Also, he's trying to take notes. He actually comes in with like a notepad, and he's trying to take notes and like give feedback between the maps themselves, which is awesome. A, because Cutie is like a veteran, he knows a lot about the game, and then B, this helps Cutie stay like even though he's currently on the bench, he stays like very like invested in like the overall strategy of what we're doing, so that if we need him, when we need him, he's prepared and ready to come in and be a part of the process. So
Yeah, so I guess we'll stay on that for a bit, and if I know a lot of people have been asking about when is IDDQD gonna like uh, play again, or however. Do you have any? Can you give some input on that?
yeah, yeah, I've seen some of the free IDDQD spam lately on the internet. With Andre, it's a little complicated. So a couple of things happened. First of all, he did get sick and he had some personal issues, and so this prevented him from being a part of some of the scrims we did just before the season started. So that wasn't, and to win, I believe you really need to build up team synergy and like get 6 people on the same page. It's very difficult to get 6 people on the same page. To get 7 people on the same page, even harder. So I'm very much a fan of like a 6-man lineup. And since QD, had to be out of the mix for a little bit there, like it's very difficult. And this is just not his fault. It's just life happens. You know what I mean? It was very difficult to bring him back in. I will. So I think the plan right now in terms of bringing him back in is to towards the end of this split. There's going to be then there's a 1-week break between splits. So we're going to like sit down and then evaluate. Like take a look and see if there's a way to sort of bring him in for the second split. But to bring him in right now, you know what I mean, when we're trying to win every single match possible, and there's only a few days between each match, it's just very difficult. But so, towards the end of the split, we're going to take a second look. The other thing, though, I will say is this is like the meta is also working against bringing him in right now, insofar as you see these players like Fleta, Dreamcasper, Baby Bay, every single main DPS on a team is being looked to right now in the current meta to flex between hit scan, so like Soldier, Widow, McCree, Carpe also falls into this category. There's a lot of players that do, right? I can't. Every single team has a player like this. You're expected to play Widow, McCree, Soldier, and then sometimes you're supposed to flex to Genji for Tracer Genji, and then you're supposed to sometimes flex to Pharah for the Pharah-based compositions, right? And so, Baby-based Genji isn't the best. Baby-based Pharah isn't the best, but I think it's probably better than Cuties at the moment. I know, but here's the thing: is he knows this. He knows that he needs to expand his hero pool. Cutie's been flexing a lot on his stream. Like you see him playing heroes that he didn't used to play, so he knows this. AKM knows this. AKM recently announced, "Hey, I'm going to start grinding Genji," because he's already got the Pharah and the Soldier, right? And the McCree, but he needs to get the Genji. So these players that have like been specialists in the sort of primary hit scan role in the past are now realizing, well, looks like my new role in the current meta is to be just like a flex god on DPS. So that means Pharah, that means Genji, that means both projectile and hit scan. There's no really room for like hit scan specialists right now in the current meta. And so I think Cutie's working on this aspect of his game, and if he keeps working on it and it keeps paying off, then he could contend for baby base spot. Or if he doesn't want to go that route, and he says, I'd rather compete with Dante for the Tracer spot, and then in the future Sinatra for the Tracer spot, Dante, or he could do that. He could say, I want to compete with Nevix for off tank. He could say, I want to compete with Dak for support. It's really up to Cutie to tell me like where he thinks he can contribute the most to the team. I'm giving him ideas. He's giving me ideas. Like there's just a lot going on in terms of matches week in and week out to like say for sure exactly what's going to happen, right? Cutie's like a phenomenally flexible player. He's been playing a lot of different heroes. He has so much experience with the game, so many hours in the game. Like I trust him to play a lot of roles, which is why he's like a perfect sub. But like right now, at this very moment, do I think he's a stronger Tracer than Dante? I think it's very close, but I think Dante has a slight edge. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. That's one of the things we'll be taking a look at, I think, towards the end of the split. In terms of if he wants to go in baby base role, he's gotta pick it up on the Pharah and the Genji, or the meta needs to shift back to what it used to be, like when Defran was unselfish, right? Where it's like he's playing Soldier and Tracer. If we go back to a meta where the Soldier / McCree / Widow player then is expected to flex Tracer, I think Cutie's probably the strongest on the team for that particular thing. Like I think Cutie's a much stronger Tracer than Baby Bay. So if we go back to that, I think then Cutie becomes insanely valuable to the team. So it's really just there's a lot of RNG here, I guess you could say, in terms of meta, and then it's also up to Cutie to just keep expanding his hero pool to match the meta. And if he's not sick and he's well, and we have the time to then go back and take a look, like we're gonna do that towards the end of the split. So.
All right, I think that covers most of that. So we'll move on to the next question. What has the team learned for the first from the first 2 weeks of OWL, and how is it changing your strategy going forward?
I'm sorry, I zoned out.
It's all right.
Can you repeat that again?
Yeah. So what has the team learned from the first 2 weeks of the OWL, and how is it changing your strategy going forward?
Well, I think one of the lessons has been basically that there's a decent variety of strategies that work, so you can kind of play to your strengths a little bit, but not too much. I think, so from a strategic standpoint, like we've stopped trying to force Baby Bay onto Genji so much, and we've, gone back to, utilizing like McCree Junkrat and, Pharah and things of this nature. That doesn't mean we never play Genji. We do. But, like we're trying to not force things as much. The other thing that we're doing is, these guys just need to like sort of like not try to force the game and let the game come to them. And so, a lot of it's just been about trying to like find like an emotional stability for the team. Because we play very well in scrims. But then when we go out on stage sometimes, like we don't necessarily play to our full potential, I think. So yeah.
All right. So next question deals with kind of like general strategy things, and someone asks, how do you respond to people saying that the team plays around Baby Bay, relying on him to make plays only?
Well, if you invest into playing a hit scan character who's very vulnerable to getting dived, so like if you're not playing Tracer Genji dive and you're playing with Widow or McCree or something, you have to keep your backline alive. And frequently, enemy teams are trying to dive your backline, like Philly, Boston, and Valiant. All three of those teams played styles that are essentially designed to go target the backline. So he, for us to play around Baby Bay and Sleepy, basically our backline, and keep them alive, that's just like how the strat works when you play a hit scan, when you play, immobile characters. We don't always do that, right? Like when we're playing Pharah Mercy strategies, Baby Bay, he's flexing the Pharah, but like we're not trying to help him win Pharah duels, right? It's actually the ground war that we're winning. Like yesterday, we played a lot of Pharah Mercy and we won all of our Pharah Mercy maps. And it's because, the team that isn't Baby Bay is like doing very well in the ground war. And like, so we're not playing around Baby Bay there at all. And we're performing some of our best Overwatch. So I don't think it's true that we're always playing around Baby Bay. But I think by the very nature of playing hit scan, like if QD was in there and he was playing hit scan, by the very nature of running hit scan heroes, like when you run them, you kind of have to play around them. You have to keep them in the fight. They're the most diveable heroes. They're the most exposed heroes, and without a lot of support from the team, they will die and they will feed and we will lose. So that's just the nature of playing those heroes. If we play Tracer Genji, like some of the other teams do, which is not our strength, but if we were to do that, like if maybe later in the season when Sinatra comes in, you know what I mean? Like this becomes much more viable to us. But if we were to play Tracer Genji, then it's less centric. Like there's less diveable targets in general, right, on our team. So then you don't have to play around anyone. But when you play run hit scan, you have to keep them alive. You have to give them healing. You have to give them resources. It's just the way the game works. It's not so much about Baby Bay so much as it is just the meta and running those particular heroes.
All right. Yeah, I definitely think it's like one of those things that it may look like that on the surface, but there's so much more to it going on that it's hard to see in some cases. But yeah,
A lot of it revolves around Zen as well. Like, you look at the way New York plays around Jay Jonak, right? We're like just backline in general needs to be very supported. And whether it's Baby Bay and Sleepy in the backline or just Sleepy, either way, you kind of have to keep your Zen alive. So a lot of these games are very like focused on like Zen and making your Zen pop off. That's
yeah.
why New York is winning. Yeah.
Quick shout out to the Aftershock video we put out, where that's literally one of the things the super says. I'm pretty sure it's just keep Sleepy alive. It's the key.
Yeah,
to,
we've jokingly Sleepy's jokingly renamed himself, and we've embraced it, K Konak. Yeah, because we want to emulate, what New York is doing with Jay Jodak, so we made him K Konak. It's really funny, but
Yeah.
it's a really good lesson to draw.
Okay, so someone else asks or poses the thought of, I want to start a team with my friends. How should we practice, and how do you come up with strats?
Well, I guess so the first thing you want to do is you want to try to get into the discords that are, where you can find scrims, right? Like the OW Discord, where they have like there's multiple discords out there where people essentially post for scrims, whether it be university teams or tier 2 or tier 3 teams, just like looking for games. So half of it is just getting 12 people in a server, your 6 guys and their 6 guys, right? And then from there, you want to I think be disciplined with like a schedule. You want to set a schedule, so make a Google Calendar, get everyone to show up at the same time, get some buy-in from everybody, get some commitment out of everyone. And if there's somebody on the team who isn't committed, I would say, very quickly just say, hey, man, we love you, but like the 5 of us here are trying to go hard, and you're either late or you're not showing up or you don't seem as invested in this as we are. And so then you start to slowly find 6 people, right, who are focused on winning as much as you are, or focused on playing scrims at least as much as you are, and maybe that builds into something further down the road. So that's the first part. It's just like being organized and gathering up people, and finding people that actually care about this. The second thing then is to then start to, I would say, just like watch the best teams in the game play, like watch Overwatch League teams, and literally try to copy what they're doing. And then, as you try to copy what they do, try to understand, well, why are they doing this? Like, just assume that the reason that they're doing what they're doing has a purpose, right? And try to get to the bottom of what that purpose is. Like, how, this comp, it exists. They're positioning in this way. Why are they positioning this way? Who's watching the flanks? Who's getting the healing, or the harmony orbs from the Zen? Who's getting the mercy pocket? Where's the mercy positioning? Like, look at positioning. When they win a fight, do the tanks push out and take space? You know what I mean? Like, try to understand why each player is doing what they're doing, and this will help you craft in your head, sort of what the meta is and what good strategies are and why they work. And this will just help you then innovate and build your own strategies going forward. I would start with what the pros are doing and then try to innovate off of that, as opposed to saying, I can create a strategy from scratch that's going to be better than what the pros are doing. Yes, maybe you can, but it takes a lot of time and scrim experience to get to that point. I don't think you can just do it sort of like off the cuff. The meta is the meta for a reason. These Overwatch League teams are doing what they're doing for a reason. So I would start there and then try to build on it. Everything we do on our team is mostly like iterations of stuff that's already been done. Very rarely do you just come out of left field with like completely new stuff,
Yeah. So the next question has a bit to do with I forget who it was that answered it, but someone talked about it, how like the roles switch around, like saying people play the same character sometimes in our starting lineup. So someone talks about, it seems like Dak isn't as comfortable on Mercy. Why keep him on Mercy if he's more comfortable on Lucio?
Well, Dak's been getting a lot of flack. Some of it's justified for sure. Some of it isn't. Dak has very bad habits. For example, Dak doesn't always check the kill feed before hitting Q, right, and popping his ult. It's just like a bad habit of his. He did this whether he's on Lucio or Mercy. Like he's had bad beats on Selfless. He's had bad Valkyries on Shock. Dak dies a lot, but it's important to understand that when you're a Mercy player and you die a lot of it has to do with what your team is doing. Okay, so if our tanks are overcommitting and Dak needs to shift into danger to save their life because they don't have shifts to get back to him, is that Dak's fault or is that Nomi's fault or Nevix's fault? If Dak is pocketing Baby Bay and Sleepy gets in danger, and Sleepy, rather than staying within Dak's sightline, ducks into a room and breaks LOS, and Dak can no longer shift to Sleepy to save him, and then they kill Sleepy, and then Dak is now stuck, like trying to shift to him too late, essentially, and then dies. Is that Dak's fault or is that Sleepy's fault? If Sleepy and Baby Bay constantly play, instead of playing together, they play opposite angles because they have very different mindsets to the game. Let's say Sleepy's like kind of likes to play safe, and Baby Bay likes to play aggressive, and they constantly put Dak in like tough spots. Is that Dak's fault or is that their fault? So it's very much a team effort to keep a Mercy player alive. Sleepy's playing Mercy essentially when we're running Pharah Mercy. It's a lot easier to stay alive when we're running Pharah Mercy. You know what I mean? Like the Mercy always has an escape into the air. So I think it's like a little misrepresentative to say like Sleepy's just a way better Mercy because he dies way less, because we only put Sleepy on Mercy when we're playing Pharah Mercy. And if Dak was the Mercy when we're playing Pharah Mercy, I think Dak would stay alive a lot more. So I do think Dak needs more work on Mercy. I don't think he's the best Mercy. He's probably one of the worst Mercies in the league, but it's not all his fault. And when he dies, I try to like look at how did the team allow this to happen, as opposed to like what did Dak do wrong here. So Dak's working very hard at grinding the hero. Yeah, if we live in a world where Mercy Lucio's meta, I'm all about it. I'm all about putting Dak on a signature hero. But Sleep is a phenomenal Zen player. He has so many more hours in Zen than Dak. It would be pretty. I don't think it would be the best thing to do to make Dak try to play Zen and Sleepy always be the Mercy. I don't think that that's like an efficient use of our experience, I guess you could say.
All right, so moving on to the next question. Someone's asking, what is the Shock leadership structure, like staff structure and responsibilities? Like, I guess all three of those things together. So the players' leadership structure and then the staff structure.
Um, well, there's 9 players. There's 3 essentially direct coaching staff. Myself, Legitimacy, and Harsha. I'm at the top of the food chain, I guess, in terms of like the day-to-day operations. Um, However, the org itself is very like horizontal. Players can get access to my boss and my bosses anytime they want. If they have things, concerns, things they want to voice, like they can go straight to like the top if they want to. Um, it doesn't usually come down to that because we have like a very open communicative environment with like a lot of trust that we've built up over the last many months. And I think you can see it represented in how these guys are acting around each other. But like we've gone far past the point, 50 team dinners later, we've gone far past the point of um, you know doing anything other than just voicing our concerns to each other's face out in the open, and working together in like a very collaborative sort of way. At the end of the day, though, if some ass needs to be kicked, I'm the one who kicks it. And yeah, I'd say that's pretty much it. Like, what we have is an environment where everybody's invested, everyone is emotionally committed, has buy-in, and they all just want to win. So it hasn't been an issue getting people to just show up and give their 110%.
All right, so I feel like I partially know the answer to this question, but someone asked, what will be the most fun matchup for the team? Or like, what matchup do you think they're looking forward to the most?
Um, I think these guys they want to win every single game. I guess I don't think we have like any specific rival. Our biggest scrim partner is New York, because we don't play them this split. So um, there's not a lot of downside to sort of revealing everything our full hand to them for this split. Um, and we love New York, so I think we just want to play New York on stage one of these days because they're kind of like our Korean brothers. So we're looking forward to that, I would say.
Yeah, I know because as you said, New York is our main scrim partner. We kind of always have there's one team each split that we will not play, and so this time it's New York, which is rather
Right.
fortunate. So that's definitely. I thought I was like, it's either they either want to get revenge on LA, Valiant, or they want to actually play New York for real. But so moving on to the next question, will you be subbing players more frequently once Super and Sinatra are available?
I don't know. Um, that's the honest answer. I don't think so. Uh, I guess it would slightly depend on the meta, but um, I'm not a huge fan of like intense subbing every match. I think I mean, you saw how it's affecting Dallas to sub so many players so frequently. That's not to say they haven't been having some success with subs. Like when Siegel comes in, they win. Or yeah, maybe it's when Mickey goes out. I don't know. But I mean, there are strengths and weaknesses. Players have strengths and weaknesses, right? There's definitely some value to subbing sometimes, but it's very difficult in like practice to get 7, 8, 9 people on the same page. Like you take a tracer player. I mean, the amount of like and Winston players, the amount of like coaching that goes into like training a Winston player to do certain things in certain situations, training the tracer, like the decision making of your tracer player has a huge impact. Like whether he tries to flank for a full minute trying to get a Zen kill, or whether he plays a defensive tracer, or whether he's working on creating space and forcing cooldowns out of enemy tanks, or whether he's focused on damage output or farming pulse bomb. Like these decisions have huge consequences to the whole team. And to say you're going to constantly swap players around, it really hurts this these little decisions, these little differences that like make all the difference. So I'm not a huge fan of like lots of subbing, and so I think we would be aiming to find like a stable lineup. But if there's just something about the meta that prevents us, like just this player's skills on hero X, Y, or Z are too weak, and this hero is just too meta on the map, like if you're on a fair mercy map and your player just has such a worse fair compared to this other player, okay, yeah, maybe you're gonna make a sub, you know. But I think at least for the core, we want the core to be consistent. So I don't imagine a ton of subbing later in the season. Maybe it'll go, right now it's basically 0 so far. So maybe it'll go from 0 to a little bit, but I would not expect a lot.
All right. Next question is pretty interesting. So do you think the map pool system benefits some teams in certain stages and some in others?
Sure. I mean, I don't think we benefit a lot from the current map pool. The current map pool favors Tracer Genji a decent amount. Like Anubis is basically a Tracer Genji map, flat out. Running hit scan there is like, especially on second point, is like just not good. So, the fact that we don't have like a strong Tracer and a strong Genji to play in Anubis right now is a bit of a concern. This is one of the areas where I've thought about QD. You know what I mean? Like, what if we put in QD for Anubis? Just because of this. It's something in the back of my mind that I've been thinking about. So, I think there are certain maps. There's not a lot of tank heavy maps right now in the map pool. King's Row isn't in the map pool. So I think the current map pool favors like Tracer Genji dive teams a little bit, but I don't think it's like a severe advantage. I think it's just like a modest advantage. I think the smaller map pool, like the fact that there's like 9 maps and not the full array of maps, is actually good for like the Western teams, right? Because we're just way behind the Korean teams in terms of strategy and infrastructure and experience. So for us to have like a smaller map pool to work with is benefiting us. I think the fact that the Korean teams are still 4-0 across the board in spite of the smaller map pool just like speaks to the gap that's there. But I think this sort of like slower transition into learning the maps is maybe not be the best for spectators, but it's definitely good for the teams in terms of preparation, and it's delivering like a higher level of Overwatch, I'd say, overall for the games themselves. So that's kind of cool. I think it would be cool, like in the playoffs specifically though, to have like the full map pool. I don't know what their plans are there, but the leagues, that is. But I think for the playoffs, it would be cool to see like all the maps in play.
So someone else asks, are players encouraged to play Overwatch outside of regular team practice sessions? And I suppose you could follow that up with like how much do players generally play, would you say?
On an average day, we have either 2 scrim blocks or 3 scrim blocks. It just depends on the day and whether we want to do more scrims that day or more like VOD review, strategy analysis. They are encouraged to play outside of practice. We currently don't have set requirements, but if we notice that a player is like not playing at all outside of practice, that's usually like a red flag. I don't want these guys burning themselves out. If I see somebody streaming at like 4 in the morning, I get pretty upset. And we deal with that as it comes. So that hasn't really been like a huge concern for our starting lineup. So they're encouraged to play outside of practice for sure. And it's up to them to manage, what they consider burnout or not burnout. Some of these guys, they just don't have much of a life outside of Overwatch. So it's what they want to do. I'm not going to stop them from doing what they want to do within reason, so long as they're coming into practice like prepared and ready and awake. That's fine.
Someone else asks.
It's not like we're scrimming like 4 or 5 times a day. You know what I mean? Like our scrim days are more about the strategy of the game and less about grinding scrims. So yeah.
Cool.
For them to play outside of the scrims is like not like a huge deal because we're not scrimming like an insane amount.
All right.
One
So,
scrim block is, I'm sorry, one scrim block, somebody asked, so one
oh
scrim
yeah,
block
yeah,
is
I see
2 hours.
that.
Yeah, it's 2 hours. So they're scrimming on average 4 hours a day. Sometimes on like a day, if we're really feeling like we want extra scrims, we scrim 6 hours in a day.
And that's just purely like in-game time. There's also, I know you guys do a ton of like, you do like generally VOD review or drills outside of that, and then
Sure.
individual stuff. But yeah.
You can just assume that their average workday is 8 to 9 hours.
So someone else asks, what should somebody looking to coach themselves do to be more effective in doing so?
Somebody looking to coach themselves, like in terms of improving their own individual play, or in terms of coaching a team.
I think like improving individual play.
I mean, the best way to improve individual play, I'd say, is to find pro players who play the heroes that you want to get good at, and literally analyze them and try to say to yourself again, why are they doing what they do? Okay, so you look at a tracer player. Why does the tracer player, if he wants to blink forward and to the right, okay, let's say a tracer, I'll just use a really, this is like a weird example, okay, but I'll just use this as like an example. If a tracer player wants to blink forward and to the right, let's say 30 degrees, he can choose to either turn his mouse 30 degrees to the right and blink forward, or he can turn his mouse to the left 60 degrees and then blink sideways, right? Now, the benefit of doing the second thing is that, the enemy player that's shooting at you thinks, oh, he wants to blink to the left. And then, oh, wait, because you looked that direction, and then it's a fake, right? And he blinked right instead. So, good tracer players, high level tracer players in the middle of a fight will do this all the time. They'll look a different direction than the direction they want to blink. Okay. So this is like an example of you, if you're trying to get better at Tracer, you should be watching a pro player, and every time they do something that seems weird to you or seems to be like not something that you would do, assume that they had a good reason for it, and then try to figure out what that reason is. So that's what I would do for individual play. Just like watch pro players who play your heroes, and then try to analyze every single decision they make. In terms of like getting good at, like, if it's not about individual play, and if it was about like improving as a coach, I would say the same thing, just like instead of looking at individual players, you look at like the macro strategy of what teams are doing. Like holistically, all 6 players. You know, why did they send? As an example, why does New York send? So when they're playing first point Horizon defense, why does New York send Junkrat to contest the point as opposed to Roadhog when the enemy tracer starts to force the point? Okay, on first point Horizon. What's the reason for that? And try to figure out these small little like things that the decisions that the team is making as a whole in order to maintain the strength of their defense or the impact of their offense. So it's just the same concept. Keep analyzing like the high level play, just in terms, instead of focusing on individual players, focus on the team. If you're trying to get into like coaching, if you're trying to get into improving your own personal play, look at the individual players.
All right. So someone is asking, what are your thoughts on the whole Dallas situation with I guess the like punishment or judgment on xQc? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I went through something similar with the Fran, with Selfless. So I think it's I think it's I will say this, I've seen many players do far worse, but at the same time, I think it's always good to keep setting examples. So I'm behind the decision, I guess. And I don't think xQc has a huge problem with it. I think he's happy, and I think he's still an amazing player, and he's going to get many more chances to come back in. You know what I mean? So uh, I think, and I think, so I have no problem with like rulings like this that are trying to keep the league as professional as possible, because you can see the viewership that's coming in, you can see the mainstream hype that's coming in. We don't want to collectively, as like an esport, Overwatch esports, to throw away. We want to build goodwill among like the mainstream audience, right? Like now we've got like just people that are like not actually Overwatch players themselves watching the game. Like they can't interpret everything. They don't get gaming culture. So they overreact to certain things, I think. And maybe this is a slight overreaction, I'd say, but at the same time, like it's not like the punishment is like massively severe and that like we won't rebound from it. So it's kind of like it's something that makes everybody happy. It maintains the integrity of the league, and you know the xQc is going to have like 1,000 other chances. So because he's just good at the game and he's an awesome person. So uh, yeah, I think it's fine. I think it's fine, and you know it's also interesting for Dallas in the sense that like they're trying to go back to their sort of OG roster anyways. So the timing of it couldn't be better. I guess we can see how that works out for them, and then it gives some stability to the Dallas roster to try things out for a few weeks, and then make adjustments later in the season. So
Yeah, gotcha. So I think we're going to be wrapping it up here in a little bit. So we'll answer a few more questions and then call it good. So the next question is, how come 2CP is so much harder than other maps, and how can we deal with it? So do you have any do you have any like non-leaking strategies about how to deal with that?
yeah, I know everyone's pretty disappointed in our performance on like Horizon and Anubis. I don't know that it's that we're bad at 2CP as a team. Um, you know, in scrims we have fairly good ult management and things like that, which is usually what's important for 2CP. But here's the thing. Here's a couple of things that have gone against us so far in 2CP. The first is that in the first couple of games, our guys were overexcited and overhyped, and very emotionally like antsy, right, in the matches. And when you are this way, you tend to over communicate and over comm, and so comms get cluttered with like all kinds of useless information. And when that happens, what doesn't get communicated oftentimes is ults. And ult management is like a huge part of 2CP. So I think as these guys calm down and go through the season, their ult management will improve, and as their ult management improves, their 2CP will improve. Because we actually play 2CP fairly well in scrims. We do very well in scrims in 2CP when these guys are just like their normal, calm selves. You know what I mean? It's that stage jitters, I think, that make us play bad in 2CP because the alt management communication falls apart. The second thing is, in general, like Anubis is a Tracer Genji map, and we are not a Tracer Genji team. So I think that we are weak on Anubis in general, and we need to come up with ways to shore up our Anubis game.
All right.
I know everyone's
Yeah.
freaking out about Horizon because we
Yeah.
look so bad on Horizon, but I'm personally not too worried about Horizon. I think we're going to show some good Horizon this coming week. So
So the final question, and I don't know how much we can talk about this, but I guess we'll end on a bit of a tease question. There's been a few questions asking about what are Shock's plans for Contenders team. Yeah, as without giving anything away, obviously we are having a Contenders team. Can you give a little tease on that one and what we've been working on?
yeah, so the Contenders initially started off with the OWL staff over Christmas break, like conducting, beginning the process of conducting tryouts. We realized very quickly that this is like a tremendous amount of work, so we actually got some volunteer staff involved to helping us basically create a Contenders team among North American, EU, KR talent that's out there. We also looked at some of the existing tier 2 teams in the scene, guys like Toronto Esports who have been tearing up the tier 2 scene, guys like Kangarna, you know what I mean, like uh, Savages. Like there's some EU teams that are out there, mixed teams that have been formed. There's been like a lot of like mixed teams and existing tier 2 teams, and they're all been trying to vie for like contenders to get signed as a full six, kind of like what we went through with Selfless, which is very difficult to do, by the way, is to get signed as a full six, or to get partially signed. I think you're going to see, like towards the end of the month, you're going to see like a lot of roster announcements across the board from all the different contenders teams because there's like a deadline coming up, and yeah, you'll see our roster as well. We're looking to shore up players right now. We've got offers out. It's just a question of like who accepts and who doesn't. So it's not something I'm super involved with, but I'm aware of what's going on. And the guys that we brought in to help build the roster, I have a lot of confidence in them. So
All right, cool. Sounds good. So I think that'll wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for being here, Brad, and thank you for answering all the questions we asked. Do you have any? We'll ask you if you have any shout outs, and then we'll close it off.
Uh, just shout out to the fans who stuck with us for our first couple of matches that were rough. And you know, things are coming together. We won't disappoint. I promise. We're working so hard. You guys have no idea. We really, really want to win this thing. So we'll keep at it.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming, and we will see you all next week for the next AMA.
Thanks,
Peace.
guys. Love you. Bye.